Box. President Trump is set to unveil a $4.8 billion budget proposal today. The plan assumes the tax cuts that were set to expire in 2025 will be extended, and that economic growth will be faster than many economists had predicted. Joining us right now is Senator Marsha Blackburn. She serves on the Commerce Committee. Good morning to you.
Yes.
So the big question is, if this were to take place, do we really think that the world is, or our country is, the economic growth is faster than had been expected? Because I could make the opposite argument.
Well, I think what we do know is that the economy is growing, that jobs growth is taking place. And you look at places like Tennessee, and our economy is very robust. And what it speaks to is good federal policy coupled with good state policies is going to create that environment for jobs growth to continue.
How did you intro that? I wasn't listening. And I didn't see you sitting here, Senator. It's great to have you in studio.
It's good to see you. Good to be with you.
I had something else that I was...
No, I'm not on remote.
Did you say you could make the case that the economy wasn't growing strongly?
No, strong enough to warrant the tax cuts. So the tax cuts were based on this idea that we were going to have 3+% economic growth.
You know that
I do, right? That stipulate that that's what was said.
But President Trump did make a conscious decision at great political peril and economic peril to take on China, and there was a deal that's been done. And
I understand that, but let's just
use some of the goodwill from the tax cut to address some trading concerns, right?
I understand.
But on top of that, you do have the stock market just continues to hit new highs. I mean, it looks like you got low unemployment across the board for a lot of different.
Right.
You got some wage gains that have been better than they've been in 10 years at the low end.
Correct.
So,
correct. But
Senator, we didn't need you in here. Do you want me to keep going, or do you?
Listen, I'm just loving hearing this. But I think it speaks to something that is vitally important. The federal government does not create jobs. The private sector creates
100%.
jobs. And what we have seen with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is Americans all across this country said to Donald Trump when he was campaigning, you get the federal government off our back, out of our pocketbook. This is what we can do. He delivered, and the economy, the private sector is delivering. And as I said, you couple good federal policy with good state and local policy, and you're going to have robust economic growth.
Let me just play the devil's advocate.
No, you're not. This is how you feel. Don't throw it off on.
Couple running up massive deficits with.
From 9 to 18 trillion in the Obama years, or which ones are you talking about? When we doubled it, or just
adding $1 trillion of debt under this
at least we're getting something for it. At least. Better than cash for clunkers.
For it. The question is, in this type of economy, when in this type of growing economy, at this point in the cycle, most economists would tell you should not be running up debt.
Why? Because interest rates are too high, inflation's too high?
You go in here and you look at actually where we are. Am I for cutting spending, federal spending? Absolutely I am. And whether I was in the state Senate in Tennessee or my entire time in D.C., I continue to put forward things that would address some of our spending that I think is out of control, and to right-size the federal government. We know that when you cut regulation, when you reduce litigation, when you lower taxation, what are you going to get? You're going to get innovation in the private sector. You're going to get jobs growth.
But you're not worried about the debt and the deficit at all?
Of course I'm worried about the deficit and the debt.
But therefore, would it be responsible
who owns them?
But would it be responsible to continue to extend the tax cuts if, in fact, you can't get the spending cuts that you want on the other end? That's actually a fundamental question. Which more responsible?
It is a fundamental question, but it's not an either or. It is continue the growth, and then Congress has to have the political will.
If I told you were not going to be able to get the spending cuts, is it responsible then to extend the tax cuts?
You have to eventually get the spending cuts.
Right. If you can't get them, what's the responsible thing to do then?
You go in and you right-size it. It is irresponsible, and I think it is immoral to pass on to our children and grandchildren.
I agree with you, and that's why I find this so fascinating.
To cut it every day. And that's why you need members that are going to say, look, let's get in here and let's reduce some of this. Here is a great example of mandatory spending and new ideas that are coming to the table to how to handle it. The biggest of the entitlement programs we have is Medicaid.
Right.
And now, what are we working on? In Tennessee, they're looking for a modified block grant so that they can deliver those Medicaid services and save money, do more with less. That's the kind of public sector innovation that you need, because you've been seeing that in the private sector. And the public sector would be well served to make better use of some of that innovation and utilize technologies that are available in the private sector.
Okay.
I mean, when we talk about spending cuts, about 80% of the budget is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and interest. That's pretty much the whole deal.
Right.
So you're talking about cutting those things. Defense seems to be off the table. Medicaid is not as big as Social Security and Medicare. So, it seems as if there's this idea that there's easy fat to cut. Maybe that's not the case anymore.
Not any of it is easy. It's like Ronald Reagan said. The closest thing to eternal life on earth is a federal government program. And finding new ways to deliver these services is one of the key components. Do we need the amount of bureaucracy that we have in Washington, D.C.? Do these programs need the amount of administration? Absolutely not. That's why I applaud states like Tennessee, where the General Assembly and the governor are working together to get a modified approach on delivering Medicaid services. That's how you get the cost of delivery down.
Separate question for you. I don't know if you saw this, but Senator Ted Cruz sent a letter to Twitter. Did you see this? On Thursday, asking for them to suspend the Ayatollah's account.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
There were 4 of us.
And you were part of this?
Sent the letter, yes.
And so what was the inspiration for that? I mean, have they said anything to you about it?
We have not gotten a response yet, but we did send it because we think that as we have sanctioned individuals, that it is important for social media to also remove their access to social media platforms.
So what happens if other countries start asking to censor our political leaders?
What we want to make certain is that free speech is honored here in the U.S., but when the U.S. sanctions some of these leaders, especially when you're looking at some of the issues in Iran, we think that's fully appropriate to.
But if the Ayatollah was to send a letter to Jack Dorsey saying, I need you to suspend President Trump's account, or at least in my country, do you want it suspended around the world, or do you want it suspended just for access to citizens of the U.S. to read?
We think that this is an account that they should look, since we have sanctioned them. We think that Twitter should follow the path that we have set forward on this.
And you would do that across all social media? For all sanctions?
We think that it is appropriate when we sanction these bad actors who have the blood of U.S. citizens on their hands, that it is appropriate for us to follow through with social media and other platforms.